Southern Miss head coach Scott Berry is going to call it a career. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I am your host, Dave Schultz. Today's episode brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedon, and when you enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. We will show you said tumbler a little bit later on. All right, Scott Watkins from the Sun Herald will drop by. He is the beat writer covering Southern Miss and wanted to preview Southern Miss and the Raging Cajuns today on the radio show on 103.3 The GOAT here in Lafayette, Louisiana. And when you know it, Scott Berry decides to announce his retirement. Whoa, didn't see that coming, although apparently that was the case in Hattiesburg. They kind of saw this coming. So we talked to Scott about Scott Berry. We talked to him about how Southern Miss has turned their season around and what this series against the Raging Cajuns is going to look like. With no further ado, here is Scott Watkins from the Sun Herald talking Southern Miss Golden Eagles baseball. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Always thrilled and honored to have our next guest on. Scott Watkins from the Sun Herald covers the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. They are hosting the Louisiana Raging Cajuns in the final series of the regular season. Southern Miss still trying to win a regular season conference championship and get a number one seed in the Sun Belt Conference tournament, whereas the Cajuns, after being tied for sixth and maybe looking on the outside looking in, now trying to secure a top six seed so they don't have to play on Tuesday. They can play on Wednesday where the double elimination begins. All right, now that we got that done, wouldn't you know it, wanting to talk Southern Miss baseball and preview a little baseball series, Scott Berry decides, you know what, we're going to just, overshadow all of that and decide to call it a career. The head coach of Southern Miss announces his retirement on, I guess he did it yesterday, technically. What went down with all of this? Did it catch people in Hattiesburg by surprise?
I think the timing of it may have, but I think the fact that, this is the last year, not really all that shocking. It's something that's kind of floated around for a little bit. But I think I think the fact that it came in season was probably a little rattling for a moment. He told the players yesterday. He started with a couple of vets in his office and then told the whole team. And there were tears shed, I am told. So it was definitely something that the players were not expecting to walk into first thing this week. But it's out there now, and they had a great practice today. The vibes are really strong, and so I don't think if it did surprise the players, it won't have any negative impact on this weekend.
Was this a decision that he had just come to as of recently, or did he kind of know this was going to happen? Or we'll rephrase that. Did he know it was going to happen at the beginning of the year? Had this decision been made? Let me ask it simpler. When did he make this decision?
That's probably a great question for Scott Berry himself. We didn't get availability with Scott Berry today. It was players only, so we didn't get to talk to him about it. But again, it's something that I had personally heard from several different people pretty much since the season began. It seemed to be kind of written on the wall. So I don't know when he decided that this was it. But I would venture to guess he reached 100%. For sure going to do it sometime in the last week.
Right, probably, if that's the case. All right, so is there a reason why? Why is he deciding to call it a career now?
We haven't been able to talk to Coach Berry, so I can't put words in his mouth, and I don't want to get ahead of him. But he's had such a great career. 23 years in Hattiesburg, 14 as the head coach. He's the winningest coach in school history. They've how many regionals? I don't even know. There's so many, and they've been to so many in a row. And they hosted one recently, and they hosted a super for the first time ever last year. So it's just been such a phenomenal career for him at Southern Miss.
Well, it's interesting because on my radio show on Tuesday, you mentioned his age, 60. Nick Saban, that's young at these days. Nick Saban's turning 72 in in October and Halloween, and they're two very different sports. But I find it very interesting that Scott Perry wants to call it a career. He's not even retirement age yet.
That's true. 60 is not the end for a lot of coaches, but some coaches are different. Some want to kick back and lean back a little bit. There's a few coaches ago, Hill Denson. He's living in, I think, Louisiana on a lake, just chilling, and he stays deeply connected with Southern Miss, and that's what I expect out of Scott Berry. I don't think he's really going to go far. I think he's going to be around the program. I think he's ready to do something other than manage a top 25 Division I baseball team every day of his life. It may be time to move on to his family or whatever, but he's still going to remain a part of this program. I can assure you that.
Do you think we're talking with Scott Watkins from the Sun Herald? He covers Southern Miss. We'll get into the Cajuns and the Golden Eagles here momentarily. Do you think it had anything to do with the portal and NIL? We've seen a lot of experienced coaches decide, you know what, I don't like necessarily the direction it's going in, or not only that, it's a lot more work.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't put words in his mouth, but that's just added responsibility that gets thrown onto every coach's plate every year, and something you got to think about in roster construction, especially in baseball when you're getting your commits when they're in 10th grade, just about. So it's something that really adds a big piece to the whole construction thing. And, I can't say whether or not that's what pushed him out the door, but I can't say that a lot of coaches out there are thrilled to be doing all the extra homework.
We're talking with Scott Watkins of the Sun Herald. He's Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Okay, let's talk about this Southern Miss Golden Eagles. They were very highly touted. As you mentioned, they hosted a regional last year. They beat LSU. They hosted a super regional, came up short there. But they were highly touted coming into the season, and that's not how it started. That's how it's going now. They've won 13 in a row, which in college baseball is a little bit unheard of. Tell us how this season has gone and why. How did they turn it around?
It was a little bit of a slow start, but it was one of those things where you watch the games and you see the pitching staff is holding up okay. When they get into the bullpen, that's when things start to struggle. And then the big issue at the plate, they were getting guys on base and they were not bringing them home. For the longest time, they had just the worst batting average with bases loaded, batting average runners in scoring position. It was hard to watch at times. That clicked at somewhere halfway through the season. Those runners found home plate and they haven't stopped. So I don't know if it's anything that they're doing differently. I think it's just a few guys have gotten hot. Christopher Sargent has woken up after a very slow first half. He's now having a very, very hot second half. They had musical chairs kind of going on at second base for a while. They landed on true freshman Nick Monaster. Two-way guy, throws, hits. He hasn't thrown since April 26th, but he's continued to be in the starting lineup at second base, and he's been a kick in the pants, and he's OPSing, I think, over 900, maybe over 1,000. Had 4 hits on Sunday against ULM, had 3 hits on Saturday against South Alabama. He's been a kicker in the whole thing. So it's kind of similar to last year when they woke up in April when they inserted Carson Pato to the front of the lineup, and that changed everything. I think a couple of batters like Sargent waking up and Nick Monaster just adding a ton of juice to the lineup has really altered how this season has gone.
All right, let's take a timeout. We'll come back more with Scott Watkins talking Southern Miss Golden Eagles baseball. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Bird Dogs. I just got my first 2 pairs of shorts in the mail, and I love them. They fit great and are incredibly comfortable. Their stretchy fabric makes my legs look great, although my legs always look great. And they're comfier than my other shorts and pants. They give me the freedom to wear one pair of shorts or pants on the golf course, another to a meeting, hanging out with friends, or even on a date. So go to birddogs.com/lockedon, and when you enter the promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. And here is said tumbler right here. Yeah, there we go. All right. Got it. Looks good. All right. We will do that. I actually used it already today. So Appreciate that from Bird Dogs, and go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege to order your shorts and or pants, and then get the free tumbler with Locked On College. All right, Dave Schultz, more with Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's get back to it. Scott Watkins of the Sun Herald talking Southern Miss Golden Eagles baseball. We're talking with Scott Watkins, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. He's with the Sun Herald covering the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. This was a vaunted pitching staff coming in, led by Tanner Hall. I think he had a bad outing like a few outings ago where maybe gave up like 5 runs. But other than that, he's pitched extremely well. How has his season gone?
Yeah, well, Tanner Hall, he's just a model of consistency just about. There are a couple of Sunbelt teams that have gotten to him, Coastal, as they get to most everybody when they play at home. James Madison a little bit, but for the most part, he's just been very consistent. And he's going to eat up a lot of innings. He's going to strike out a lot of batters. That's kind of been, recently, I want to say, I'm looking at right now, 34 strikeouts in his last 3 starts. He has found some kind of groove, and he has not worked his way out of it. So he's gotten hot just as the batters have as well. And it's really done wonders for Southern Miss because it is jumping out to 1-0 leads on these series. And it's thanks to Tanner Hall.
You see, most people are impressed with the Tanner Hall 34 strikeouts in 3 starts. I'm impressed Scott Watkins could add to 34 in 3 starts.
It took me like a solid 10 seconds.
Had to carry the one. Scott Watkins of the Sun Herald on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. We've seen, from here across the basin where teams have avoided Paul Skeens. That I guess it would be Auburn and Mississippi State, who decided we'll take our, and others, I think, we'll take our number 1 and pitch them Saturday and have a number 2, and they'll be the sacrificial lamb against Paul Skeens. Has anybody done that recently with Tanner Hall or all this year? Do they change the rotation up a little bit?
If it has, I missed it. I haven't seen anybody attempt to work around Tanner Hall in that way to get a win on Saturday or whatever. But I wouldn't be surprised if something came up during the tournament. Oftentimes, I have seen that in tournament settings where coaches will work their pitching staffs in however way they want in order to get matchups. But I haven't noticed that happen with Tanner yet.
Well, so it's a little bit tougher to do it this week with the Cajuns because the extremely short turnaround the following week with the tournament. They're trying to get in to play on Wednesday. And if you move Nazoo from Thursday to Friday, now he's pitching on extremely short rest. So I'm not sure that's a feasible situation either. But I was just trying to figure out a way that the Cajuns could avoid Tanner Hall and just get that one win that they're looking for to secure a top 6 seed, which is basically what they're trying to do. It would be ridiculously somehow, if we had a 3-way tie up top first, or they lost all 3 and then they end up finding themselves in 7th. I think those scenarios are very unlikely. Not that they could lose all 3, but then the teams behind them are playing each other, so they're not going to lose 3 ball games in the standings. Yeah,
it kind of goes back to what we were talking about on the radio on Tuesday with just how deep the middle of this league is. And, it just 1 slip up, 2 slip ups, you talk about 3 slip ups and Louisiana's in trouble, right? Because the teams underneath are all – Troy's going to play in the NCAA tournament. App State is on the bubble. James Madison's on the bubble. These are good teams, and when positioning sometimes isn't everything in a tournament, I feel like in this tournament, it is everything. You need the best position possible. You need every little advantage because this tournament is going to kick some ass. Honestly, it's people. It's going to be rough. It's going to be competitive. It is 10 teams that should all be near the top of this league, probably.
Well, that's interesting because I'm not sure there's a big difference between 3, 4, 5, and 6. There's a big difference between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, or 7, 8, 9, 10. You don't want to be in that. But I think if you're 3 through 6, it doesn't matter who you're playing.
No, you're right. I mean, those group of teams 3 through 6, they're all the same, and they could all be playing postseason baseball afterwards. But I do think in this type of tournament, every little tiny advantage you can get, you want. It's baseball. It is a game of the tiniest things.
All right, let's take a time out. We'll be back with more with Scott Watkins of the Sun Herald. We'll wrap it up with him momentarily. Thanks again so much for continuing to support Locked On Sunbelt. We're at 230 subscribers. Oh, my God. Could we get to 250 by the Sunbelt Conference baseball tournament? Maybe not. Maybe when it's over. That would be good. I'll take that. That's in, 10 days. Yeah, a little bit over 10 days. So we would take that. Be very happy with that. We're trying to get, I thought 1,000. That's going to be a little bit tough, but maybe 500 by a football season. We still have plenty of time to do that. So I do appreciate it. Please continue to spread the word, like, share all the videos on YouTube, share any links that you may see on social media. It is a huge help. And again, the more we get the word out, the more we can get bigger guests on the show because it has a little bit of legitimacy. So, and they want to know that their message is getting out to their fans as well. All right. Thanks so much again. Also, don't forget, not only on YouTube, but the audio portion, anywhere you get your podcasts, just search Locked On Sunbelt and we'll be there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Amazon, wherever you get it, we are there. And again, thank you so much for tuning in and subscribing to Locked On Sunbelt. All right, let's wrap things up. Scott Watkins, I think we're talking about, at this point in time, the Sunbelt Conference tournament. It should be one heck of a tournament. Well, let's talk about some of that because it has been a crazy 2 weeks. Not forget even, Southern Miss being hot for like a month. We're talking with Scott Watkins from the Sun Herald, Locked On Sunbelt, right? I mean, I'm impressed with the Cajuns being tied for 6th and looking like, they've lost like 4 out of 5 series. They had swept Marshall, but got swept by James Madison. And they have to go sweep ULM. They have to. And then they did. And then all right, let's say 2 out of 3 from Texas State. And then they sweep the Bobcats. That's one thing what they did to go from tie for 6th to 3rd. But James Madison, my goodness, they were 11th. And they found themselves in 4th. And only because they lost the last game of the series to ODU, they're back in 6th. I mean, talk about a roller coaster. That's in 2 weeks.
Yep, and now they got to play Georgia Southern on the road, so that roller coaster will not stop anytime soon.
Well, and that'll be who knows what's happening there. What I'll ask you because I certainly haven't been paying attention. What happened to Georgia Southern? Because I've been South Alabama needed the Eagles to win a game or two, and they just kept on getting pounded by Georgia State.
Yeah, that's not something that I was expecting or anybody that pays attention to Sunbelt baseball might have been expecting. And then to get to the end of the year. And what I'm really meaning is from start to now, Georgia Southern has vastly underperformed. And then you get to the end of the season, and I don't think anybody would have if you said, hey, back in February, hey, in May, Troy's going to take 2 or 3 from Georgia Southern, and then Georgia State is going to take all 3. I don't believe you. Right before the Sunbelt tournament, I don't believe you. So I don't know what this Eagles team is, what has happened to them. They got good ball players, but they just can't. Having a tough time getting wins and putting them away.
And then I don't know if the schedule didn't help, but obviously, playing Southern Miss and Coastal Carolina back-to-back is just brutal. I had mentioned that maybe if those series were the opposite, like South Alabama was hosting Southern Miss and then played at Coastal Carolina, maybe they win, 1 against Southern Miss or maybe 2. But now all of a sudden they went from winning 10 in a row to losing 6 straight, and they are looking on the outside looking. And it's going to be very difficult for them to get into the Sunbelt Conference tournament.
Yeah, and that's just one of those things that it shows you just how deep the league is. To have that kind of a program on the outside looking in the conference tournament, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it'll be really interesting. And you think this conference tournament is totally up for grabs? You don't think you will not be surprised?
I'm not looking at Coastal. I don't think Coastal Carolina is a shoe-in. I don't think Southern Miss is a shoe-in. I look at the teams that are competing, and I can't circle any one team to say, yeah, they're going to do it. You look at Southern Miss, and there's always that thing in the back of your mind that they've won 13 in a row. And as you said earlier, that's just not something that college baseball teams do.
Right.
At some point, the gas hits E, And will it happen to Southern Miss? I don't know, but it's asking a lot to push that win streak to 16 games, to 17 games,
So it sounds like not only right. Well, not only can Scott Watkins do math, but it sounds like you believe in the baseball gods that things tend to even out somewhere along the way. So that bad hop is bound to come, is what you're suggesting.
Absolutely. That's typically how things happen. I'm not saying it will. When talking about baseball, it's very important to have that underlying rule. Anything can happen. There's absolutely no guarantee in baseball at any point. But things do even out.
All right, so a couple of things. Let's wrap things up with Scott Watkins from the Sun Herald. You're listening and watching to Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. The SEC, so we have this run rule here that is kind of, whenever, maybe on travel days in the conference on a Sunday, but that's it. And then maybe during the week you can set it up, even during the game you can decide on it. The SEC's got a run rule now that whenever it happens, all right, we want a safe pitching. We don't want anybody to get hurt. We've had a couple of football scores in this conference the last couple of weeks, right? We've seen 35 runs scored. I think James Madison put up like 35 runs, and someone else put up 25 runs.
I think it was
Coastal scored 11 in the first against South Alabama last week.
I wish I could find who put like 30-something runs on ULM. Oh, it was Georgia Southern. Yeah, they put 35 on. Yeah.
I mean, isn't somebody waving the white flag?
Apparently not. It may come up after the season because I can't tell you that I've seen that. I saw that last year.
Right. We have not really seen that. Maybe those are two aberrations. But I think in general, just to save the pitching, and then I've heard some other suggestions that teams like to play, 9 innings. They know when sometimes in the week, we're not talking about teams that are even, when lesser opponents are playing, better opponents, that, they want to play the 9 innings because I got to get guys in that don't see time. I got to get somebody in who to get 3 or 4 at-bats that doesn't get 3 or 4 at-bats on the weekends.
Yeah, I think once you've got like a 20-5 lead, I think in a league that doesn't have all the hard run rules, as a coach, I feel like it's an important responsibility to get other guys in there, and you're not protecting anything but the health of your players at that point. So
right. All right, what else are you writing about as you get ready for the Cajuns and Southern Miss this weekend? Apparently, Southern Miss has something to play for as well. They're not coasting to the finish either.
Yeah, I mean that's what we'll be talking about is Southern Miss, and this is a really important weekend, especially with Coastal Carolina playing Marshall this weekend as well. It's going to be tough to get that regular season crown, but Louisiana is not playing Southern Miss, the baseball team, this weekend. It's playing Southern Miss, the program. It's got a bunch of kids that all have a central thing to play for. A team that has won 13 in a row now has motivation.
Right.
So we'll see what that means this weekend.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Baseball's that one sport, right? It's more along the lines of golf than football and basketball. You can't try harder in baseball. That's the only thing.
It usually hurts you if you do.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem. All right, he's Scott Watkins with the Sun Herald covering the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. It should be a whale of a series between the Cajuns and the Golden Eagles. Scott, thanks so much. If I don't talk to you or see you, have a great time in Montgomery. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave.